second session of our welcome to the second session here of our community of practice. We're really excited for folks to join us today. I have a couple of introductory slides about our center that I wanted to share, and then we want to really maximize the time that we have with our excellent presenter today, who has so much deep experience doing this work, George Fleming. So let me just quickly go through some introductory slides. Our center, NTAC, the National Center for Children, Youth, and Family Mental Health, is funded by the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, or SAMHSA. And obviously what we're presenting today don't reflect the views of SAMHSA or HHS. These are kind of our individual views of presenters. We've had a couple of issues, unfortunately, with some problems with security and folks, sharing inappropriate content, folks kind of coming into our sessions and Zoom bombing, I think it's called. If that happens, I'm sure it will be okay, but we have passwords for these sessions now. If that happens, we'll just stop the session and find a way to get you the content. You'll get instructions about how to get the rest of the content for our session. So I just wanted to welcome everyone again and to ask that folks please type into the chat your location, role, and something you're excited about doing that you haven't been able to do for a long time here in the pandemic as things start opening up. There are so many, I'm sure there's things that we've all been waiting to do. I'm really excited. I'm going to say that I'm really excited for my kids to be able to go to camp this summer and be outside of the house for the first time in a long time. I'll reintroduce myself again in case there were folks that were not able to make the first session of our community in practice on engaging fathers and father figures in programs and systems. I'm Pamela Trivedi. I'm the infant and early childhood lead for our TA center for NTAC. And I'm really excited to be here, really just to create a forum for wonderful folks like George to be able to engage with you. I just wanted to bring up, so in the first session that we had last week, we had a really helpful research framework presented by our colleagues in federal government for engaging dads that talked about strategies on the program level, the organizational level, and the systems level. We did send around some resources from that work yesterday, I think. So there's some great case studies that came out of that work. So we hope that you will be able to access those and use them in your work. It's noting that a couple of these topics came up in the breakout rooms and in the chat box that folks are really interested in and excited to learn more about strategies for engaging with young fathers who are parenting teens, who have a great interest in child development and participating in their children's lives. Folks also had some questions about supporting fathers of children with multiple special healthcare needs, so behavioral health issues and other kinds of disabilities. And then it seemed like a couple of folks were also interested in sort of two-generation approaches or frameworks for working with dads who've experienced trauma as well as their children. So I mean, I think that these are questions that we're going to be addressing throughout the rest of our work together, but I wanted to put them up there so that we could all hold them in mind as we have this opportunity to engage with George. George also has a lot of insight into these questions. So our TA center, right? We went over this last time, but I'll just go through this really quickly. We have a number of great partners involved in our TA center that we're excited to engage sort of expertise across all of these partners. Our goal, we provide innovative, responsive, and multimodal training and technical assistance that supports systems level change and the advancement of evidence-based and culturally responsive practice. Here are some examples of some of our audiences, and I think based on the registration report, it seems like a lot of you folks are kind of folks in different sectors are engaged in the call today. It seems like we also have a lot of practitioners and folks at family advocacy organizations, which is really awesome. And here's kind of a model of how we at NTAC are delivering services. We can provide individual consultation. We have these kind of deeper learning opportunities that are our communities of practice. And we also, if you get on our listservs, there'll be links to subscribe to some of our kind of regular information and digest that we put out. Without further ado, I wanted to introduce our wonderful speaker, George, here. So George is a native of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He has worked in the human services field for 3 decades. At an early age, George realized that he had a compassion for the plight of all people and a desire to serve them. George has a great background in the human services delivery field that includes a lot of decades in leadership positions and oversight of substance use and recovery programs, residential group homes, mental health services, reunification services, homelessness shelters, mentorship and prevention services. So kind of the full range of human services, which is amazing. So George also several years ago founded a nonprofit called The Father's Touch, and that this work that George is doing now is just the result of his passion from all the years of working with men in families. George will talk more about just how in his work he realized how undervalued and how the missing link in families and the community at large was men and fathers. So through the Father's Touch, George is able to provide education, training, and coaching and opportunities for cultural and recreational activities that really help men reach their maximum potential as fathers, husbands, and leaders in their homes and community. George also has another kind of vehicle for helping folks, which is his consulting and training work that he does, and he has just really interesting contracts with lots of organizations that he can provide help in father engagement training, trauma-informed care. One of the topics that a lot of folks are asking about, the effects of trauma on the African American community, on kind of substance use, recovery, leadership development, and just many other areas. So I want to just turn it over to George now. And George, would you mind starting with sort of how you became kind of connected to working with fathers and on fatherhood?
Yes, and every time I hear somebody talk about me, it just makes me smile because I'm just somebody who cares and continues to care about families. But thank you, Pam, for the introduction. I have 4 grown kids and 13 grandkids. The last 3 days, I have actually been caregiving for 3 of my grandkids, 2 of my grandkids, while their parents were in Florida. I haven't had a vacation so far, but God bless them. My daughter, who is now 28 and got married in August, and it was a proud moment in my life. I took her to a wellness visit, and when I walked in the door at a facility for several doctors that were pediatricians, the lady at the desk asked me, after she asked for my insurance card, she said, is mom working? And, or where is mom? And it dawned on me after she said that, and I handed her my card. I wonder why she asked me that. And so I followed up with the question, ma'am, why did you ask me that? And she said, well, it's not common that we see men coming to wellness visits. And from that point on, I started asking myself the question, where are our fathers? What are our roles? And what has happened systematically over the years that have diminished our roles, so much so to the point where a lot of fathers don't even feel they have a value to participate or a right to participate in their children's lives. Fast forward, I started noticing it more and more in the human service field, and I've worked in all those different dimensions, but it's the same everywhere. No matter what layer I find myself in, when I was an outpatient, every time I went out to greet a new family, there was women and kids. When I worked in the shelter, when they brought the shelter kids to us, and I was only, this is 30, 40 years ago, there wasn't even no question about fathers, all the way up to now, where I actually am over a department called Allegheny Family Network Fathers Involved Now. And we work with the County of Allegheny on reuniting families and hopefully fathers. So the reason this became so important to me is as I started to matriculate through my career, what I call my actual calling in life, I started doing more reading and research on this issue, and come to find out around 10 years ago that a lot of the work that we all are doing and want to do with good effort, we're leaving out one major factor, and that is a lot of the social ills that we see in our society, according to research, not just me. I've seen this in person, by the way. are connected to fatherlessness. I've said way before COVID that I still think it's our greatest unspoken pandemic. Now, I am certainly pro-family. I'm pro-woman. I'm probably as open as a person can get. However, the neglect of our system to address the father's role in the family is expensive. Some estimates suggest we spend upwards of, and then I think this is a low estimate, $1 billion a year on different organizations, initiatives, and services to cover this gap. What I always say is I can save them a lot of money. Institute very engaging fatherhood programs, get men at the table, tool men up, and a lot of families could find out that the men are valuable resources. Now, why is that important? Well, let's take the system that I work in. The majority of the workers for children, youth, and family are female and are young, are inexperienced. In a lot of cases, they're freshmen to the work. God bless them. However, some of them don't even have kids. That's not my issue. My issue is they come with implicit biases and or lack of experiences. So when they approach a situation, they approach it from what they've been told. And a lot of what they've been told is not good things about fathers. I have been in trainings with the county, with caseworkers, and I asked them, when the word fathers come to mind, what do you think of and hear? The one that was worse and it was the most repulsive to me was sperm donor. I often say, and I said this to Pam, I believe our primary pivot point is in our minds and how we addressed it more from a heart issue. Because let's think about this. If we believe that children are our greatest investment, and I know that CYS does because their job is to keep kids safe, then why wouldn't we give every child we come in contact with the opportunity to have both parents? Now, there's all kind of reasons why that can be prohibited, but unless there is a legal ratification that is actually documented, the father's rights, unless they've been terminated, are still in place. And often men don't even feel like that. Number two, our system is extremely biased when it comes to race. So African American men fare much worse than other men in the system and or in the penal system. So we got a whole group of men that are just off the grid. I go into the jails and deal with men. All the men that I deal with are fathers, by the way. Well over 85% of the men in jail and women are parents. So these kids still are orphans in a lot of ways, even though they might be in a foster care or the systems. The other thing I would say, and we can ask questions as we move on, is if we really want to make a difference, how do we examine the culture of our organizations honestly, without reprisal and or kickback, to say we got problems here and we need to talk about them? And because we're not wanting to do that, a lot of times we perpetuate the system that I now see in place, and that is a system that neglects and disengage fathers even without good reasoning. That's my entry point.
That's, I mean, it's been an amazing journey, and that, there's so much in there that's so powerful that you just spoke about. I'm sure lots of folks have questions. Folks can also feel free to type your questions into the chat box, and we'll make sure to ask your questions out loud here in the webinar. You started to mention some of this work, it was implicit in what you were saying, but I wonder if you could be a little bit more explicit about can you, from your perspective, how can organizations be more father friendly?
Yes, let me be very specific. There is actually, and I mentioned this to Pam, and Jane knows about it, there's actually a father engagement tool that an organization can use, and it must start at the top. By the way, let me say this. A lot of people at the front level or the management level, those are not the people that I struggle with. The mind of an organization starts off in the mind of the leaders. So go the leaders, so go the organization. And so what I try to do is get to the people to make decisions and affect the culture of the organization by using this objective tool to help them take a look at readiness. They call it readiness to actually do father engagement. If you're going to do father engagement, it must be intentional, it must be transparent, and it must be something you can document. And that tool can be found on NFI's website, which is called the National Fatherhood Initiative. Great resource. I've used them a lot. I've actually brought them in to do trainings on 24/7, Inside Out Dads, and Understanding Dads, which is the curriculum I've been trained in specifically to train moms on the issue of gatekeeping and understanding the liability of keeping their kids from their fathers because they don't get along. That's a big deal, by the way. Men pay child support and can't see their kids. They're not even struggling with child support. They just want to see their baby. I deal with this all day, every day. I just got a call about this just now. They call me Chief. Chief, what should we do about this? The father's doing everything they're asking him to do. And the person that has the kids just decided that she didn't want them to get on the bus to be brought over to his house for the visit. And there's no repercussions for that. Now, if the shoe's on the other foot, they'll send the police. So these are the kind of things that your organization has to take a look at. The other thing is, then what does the aesthetics look like? Most organizations are not cognizant when you walk in. If a man walks in, particularly a man of color, most of the time, a man of color will look around and say, I don't even feel welcome here. There's nothing that suggests you want me here.
Mm-hmm.
And that could be from a bank all the way down to a spa. And the reason for that is, in terms of marketing, we market more towards women and kids than we do men. Just ask Wall Street.
Those are, you're sparking a lot of interesting questions here, George. Those are really good points. I know that Tyrone wanted to ask a question or share something, and we also have a question that came into the chat box. So why don't we let Tyrone go ahead?
Yes, I'm a member of the Rhode Island Fatherhood Initiative, and we did ask about how we felt fathers were defined, and another term outside of sperm donor was wallet. That all we are good for is the money, and it looks like it's been going that way for a long time. What we also discovered that when parents go to court, it's always leans 80% mother, 20% father. And we're working towards having it recognized that it should be 50-50. That when parents go to court, it should start 50-50, then look at the circumstances and situations and determine from that place who should end up with supportive custody or whatever. What do you have any thoughts about that?
Yes, and what's ironic is, this is why I say it's a pandemic, meaning it's global. This is not a Pittsburgh issue and a Pennsylvania issue. You're not from both. We see the same thing here. Now, the issue is the judges. That whole system has to be educated and then possibly reformed. We talk about reform as in it's a single act. It's a process of accountability, which is hard to get to happen from that level down. Judges are in powerful positions. Sure to God in my life, they can sit up on that balcony in them black robes and make life-changing decisions for people. And if you get too far out of control, they call the sheriffs to come get you. So one of the issues is trying to get to, and I've had the opportunity to train them as well. When you talk to judges, Mando, even a lot of male judges, they're biased in terms of kids just naturally belong with their mother. If you take two parents in the same gender, in the same situation on crack, the mother will walk out with the baby instead of the baby maybe going to a paternal or maternal relative. Now, here's the other thing about what you just asked. If a man does not have a job, does not negate his impact on the child. Research doesn't say that. It impacts his ability to physically take care of a child. But when I left my grandkids, they're 3 and 9 months old, they never concerned about a wallet. What they wanted to know was, what time are you picking us up from daycare? The 9-year-old don't even talk. Are you gonna make me feel safe like my parents that left me here? And the baby who's 9, give me some milk. And my 3-year-old, he wants the dinosaur biscuits. Now, the point is, him and I got along well because he has a father in his life. So he automatically responded well to me, you see, but it had nothing to do about money. So you're right, sir, that's a big issue. And that is called stereotyping. I do agree that, let me say this, men should be held accountable. I've paid child support. Ain't nothing about me perfect. I'm 30 years clean. So I'm talking from the heart, I'm telling you what I know. I know that men should be held accountable. Men should learn who they are, but they should not be punished because they got issues. That should not be a form of punishment. No different than a person should be dragged out of a car and killed because of color. That should not happen.
Again, more super powerful examples. And I think you're making some really excellent points about kind of the intersection of race and economic status for a lot of the dads that we work with. So really excellent points. I think that one of the questions, and you've talked a lot about the bias that frontline staff have. So Kara asked a really good question about how can you stop or disrupt some of this bias when most of the staff are single women? So can you talk a little bit about how you've worked with staff over time on kind of reducing implicit bias?
Great question. The best way I won't say the best way. When I work with children, youth, and families, I do not come from an accusatory perspective. And I don't hold it against somebody because they might have a different sexual or gender preference. What I talk about is this, Pam, and I'll talk to you about this. My new approach is this, and you can write this down and use this, Tyrone. How about we look at families as as family with father engagement through the eyes of the child for the overall well-being of the family. It's a whole nother viewpoint. Because if you're talking, any organization that deals with kids should want to think about, how can I help this child to be more well? Research will tell you that by having his fathers involved, and particularly younger kids. Adolescents, it leaves a hole in their souls. This is why so many boys are so jacked up, because they want to belong to something and somebody. If you do research, what you will find out is the majority of kids that go into gangs, all these subcultures, come from fatherless homes. By the way, I just watched a documentation on trafficking. Listen to me. The first question that the pimp asks when they approach a young lady, particularly that has ran away from the system and or been neglected, so on the street, is, where's your father? Where's your father? Why? Because he now recognizes her vulnerability is in fatherhood. She's now ripe for prostitution. Now what happens after that? Here's his next statement. I'll be your daddy. This is how powerful this stuff is. And systematically, we don't seem to get that. That's an important part. The other thing that Tyrone is talking about is, if a man, what we try to do is help a man to get a job, try to help somebody get housing. All these things are legitimate. When I met with a guy yesterday who'd been in jail 50% of his life, his mindset is his biggest culprit. He's a father of 4. But guess what? His father and his mother were both in the drug game. Guess what he's in jail for? You guessed it. And one of the things he said to me is, I said, well, where do you belong and where do you fit? He said, Mr. G, I don't know. He said, that's why I'm reaching out to you. You're the only person. And I met him in Allegheny County Jail 2 years ago. He said, I kept your phone number because I knew that you cared, and if I got out, you would answer the phone. That's why I called you. I don't even know what you can do for me because my needs are so great. He said, but I just need to sit down and talk to somebody because I've never really had a healthy man take an interest in me, that to have no personal gain.
So just getting back to Kara's question about working with staff over time on these issues, does it help then to ground and center kind of the value of the work in the impact on the child when you're
Use
talking to them?
Use education.
Mhm.
I use data, ask open-ended questions with your peers when why do you feel that way? I was doing some reading the other day, and it suggests that our kids are better off when their fathers are involved. What do you think about that? Have you tried? Have you tried reaching out to the father? Well, I don't have time. I got all to do. I understand that, but I'm just asking, have you tried? And what if we're wrong? What if we're wrong? Am I going to suffer for that? No, I'm still getting paid. Who's going to suffer for it? The kid on my caseload. So I asked 3 questions. And the other thing is, people that make change are often unpopular. I'm not the most popular person in Pittsburgh because I advocate for what a lot of people believe is a waste of time. But I'm going to keep on doing it because I know it's not a waste of time. That's not going to happen on my watch. Let me also say this, because this is something I'm big on, and that is, you cannot have these children, no matter what way you cut it, without us being involved at some level. So you're right, we can be a sperm donor, but it still makes me a father. Even if you buy and sell the sperm, excuse my transparency, but it's a fact. You can't change biological and divine factors based on our cultural belief systems. Men are supposed to be involved with their kids' lives. That's a part of their fatherhood responsibility. We wasn't given this right by God just to neglect it. We're supposed to steward over what we create. And a lot of times men need help to do that. I have. You need help to do that. Now, you asked the question about younger men. You got to go to where they're at, find out what their interest is, and do it in a non-traditional way. You take them to baseball games, you go on the basketball court with them, you listen to rap music with them, and then you ease your way into fatherhood. You just don't put them in a group and start talking to them about how to be a better father. By the way, there's no such thing as a better father. It's how can you be the best father that you are? Rodney is different than George. So I'm not a better father than Rodney. I'm in it with Rodney. We cross-pollinate on our resources because we all are in this to learn and help each other. The other thing is to answer the question about the system, and that is this. There was a case study where one caseworker had a case that was 4 decades old, which we have them here in Allegheny County. The folders look like this. And she said, and I don't, people don't always do all this, but she read the whole file of this case. And she couldn't find nowhere where the father was engaged or fathers. It was multiple children. And guess what? She said, I'm gonna try something different. After years of being involved, she closed the case within a year because she went down the maternal side and found resources that nobody had ever tapped into. Nobody ever tapped into. And she just couldn't, she said, I was just doing my job. But why was that considered a phenomenon versus a practice? That should be a practice. Engaging fathers should be how we work with families. If it's not possible, he can't be found, he don't want to be found, then keep it moving. That's fine. But most men I meet, I got 90 guys on our caseload. Most of the guys that we come in contact, very few of them say, man, don't bother me. I don't care about them kids. What they say to us, man, it doesn't matter. It don't matter. They're not going to call me back. They don't call me back. They don't care what I think or say. And so after a while, they become disenfranchised. And then the system says, see, told you. I'm leaving room for questions.
Yeah, thank you. There was another follow-up question from Kara, who asked, so Kara works in a Head Start setting, so in an early childhood setting. What do you feel the best practices and strategies to promote co-parenting to moms who do not want to involve fathers in Head Start activities?
I did a training for AIU Head Start, whole room full of women, one guy. And what what came out of it on the survey was a lot of them they just hadn't been, they said, I just hadn't thought about it. And we just didn't think about strategies on how to do that. So one of the things they start doing is asking mom more questions about the dad and finding out, would it be okay to have like a family fun day? Would you be comfortable with that? The second thing they did is, when possible, reached out to fathers. So if the mother said, I ain't gonna call him and tell him, but you call and tell him, here, they took it upon themselves to do that. And then the third thing is, when they did that, they got an overwhelming response that they didn't expect. And that sent them into a whole nother platform of thinking, because they just said they didn't know. We do something here in Pittsburgh called Take a Father School Day. Schools complain all the time about father engagement. Thousands, and I go to all of them, thousands of men come out of the woodwork. I mean, some of them smell like weed, some of them smell like they was out all night, but they come. And this was interesting. We do this event and no follow through. I mean, thousands of men. We all inundate schools. We pick certain schools, we go there, sometimes we go in groups. And when we go there, we go into we go into one room. We have like an opening speech on how important it is. And then you should see the kids come running down and jumping in their kids. And this is high school kids. My dad is here. The other thing is, the kids that don't have a father figure, they tend to sit off to the side. And those are the kids that you got to be the most concerned about. So you can do creative things. Head Start, the other thing to do in Head Start is there's developmental science, and you know this, that says from utero, fathers talking to their babies, reading to the babies, things that men are uncomfortable with, participating in the classes, and so on and so. This makes a difference. But a lot of times men have to be shown and taught that because they're uncomfortable to do those things. I was uncomfortable. You know, when you start talking to a stomach, I mean, come on now. I mean, come on. It's a little different. But I'm telling you something, it works. And there's research. It's not what I think. Research has backed this up. And they can put a scan on the stomach, and when the father says something, the baby reacts. You research it for yourself. So this is very important. Now the baby's attached to the mother. We know that in utero, who carries her, but the baby is still keenly aware to a voice they never met. Why? Because it comes from the father. Some of this stuff is not rocket science to me. If you really stop and think about it, it's really not. It's biological and it's spiritual, but it's real. The other thing I come to appreciate is this: once you get a father that gets some success, he now tells other fathers. And now I have men that are ambassadors who do volunteer work just for the organization on the strength of what we did for them 5 years ago. It don't cost no money. Don't cost no. I give them a t-shirt with AFN on it, and I say, hey, man, it's a food bank. I want you to go up there and give back because you have been given to. Oh, they're like, no problem, G. Where do you want me to go? We take the kids to the Stiller camp every year. All the men are the chaperones, but we bring the whole family, grandmothers, everybody. But we make sure the grandmothers and them and the mothers, they get on the air-conditioned bus. The school buses, I get on with the men, with the kids, because I'm making a point that we got to go the extra mile sometime to be involved. We're not looking for what's comfortable. We're looking for what is right to do. And you got to model that.
Those are some really helpful examples. I also love the way that George, you're able to translate research into, really a way that's so understandable and compelling. I need to learn more about how to do that, but I really like the way that you use research in your approach. Also, we had a couple more questions. So some folks were wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about what those Take Your Father to School day look like. Is it just sort of business as usual, or are there specific activities for fathers? Okay.
Specific, yeah, it's specific by school.
Okay.
There was a guy by the name, and some, you can give people my information. They can feel free to reach out to me. I do consultant work as well because we only have a short period of time here.
Right.
And a lot of these questions take what I would call deeper dive discussions. However, for the sake of the question, this guy named Mark Brentley, who was on the school board, who was really a lightning rod on the school board, started recognizing the lack of father involvement in school and on the impact on education. That's another research factor. Look at education look at education, school failure, and fatherlessness. There's a parallel there. Now, what he did about it was they kept saying, the teachers and such, the fathers won't come. So he created this Take a Father School Day. It started off with a handful it started off with 3 schools, it blossomed across, and then the district bought into it. Because the politics of schools are really difficult to break into, really difficult, even going and provide services. However, this took off so well. Then what happened was we would all go down to the city county building the day before and get a proclamation by the city council to recognize the importance of taking a Father's School Day. Then we would go on the courthouse steps and have boxed lunches. And then we took that energy and synergy and pushed it out to local communities and had men assigned to go to certain schools or several schools, and then worked along with the principal to set up a day that included father engagement. So after we came in and all met in one room, then the kids came and met with their fathers. Then they went back to the teachers with the father and introduced them to their teachers or teachers. Then we came back and had lunch together, and then we came back and had a closeout. But it was well organized. It was well, but it could start off with one school. If you get one school to do it, it really is, it's a beautiful thing to see.
That's really helpful. I think Crystal had a very specific question about engaging fathers when families are still intact. Crystal, do you want to just go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question, please?
Okay. So basically, when I'm working with families, even from the very beginning, when applications are turned in, I hear if I call mom, let's say I don't get a hold of her because she's first on the application, then I go to dad. I get a lot of like, oh, I don't know, call mom, mom handles that. Or even like once they're enrolled, and we're trying just check in like how things going. I'll call dad and it's a lot of can you just call mom handles all this stuff, or like setting up parent conferences, like trying to involve dad, and dad's like, oh, handle with mom will take care of the conferences. So it's just like the roles are kind of already set where dad doesn't do the schoolwork and the kid stuff, even when we're trying to reach out and just like do the simple check-ins. So I'm just not sure how to go further to engage those fathers, just in the simple things of like, yeah, you are important too. You are a role in their school, like come to the parent conferences, like both of you guys, and all that. So I just wasn't sure how else to connect with them on that end.
Good question. Here's a couple of practical things. One is asked him, do he understand the importance of this information to him? And number 2, talk to him about the value of where do you work at? Is it Head Start, or where do you work at? What kind of organization?
Yeah, I work at a tribal Head Start program, and I'm the family service worker.
Right. Okay. So you can also say that one of the things that I've come to appreciate is, and you're not alone, is a lot of fathers have designated roles to mothers. That's really very, not only patriarchal, it's really antiquated, because there's a whole pendulum now of stay-at-home dads. There's a whole movement where they go to the park, they got the kid, and listen, there ain't nothing soft about this. This is big stuff. And it's, if you want to cry, you go see, you can look and see there's stay-at-home, and they agree that this is, the mom might be the breadwinner. I've known fathers that have quit and said, I'm not going to miss this time in my child's life because my dad wasn't there. Okay, so the other thing you can do is you can try to do some kind of events where you invite fathers only. If you get 3, you can start with 3 and really help them to understand why we're doing this. We're doing this because we know you want what's best for your child. And in order for that to come to pass, your participation is past measurable. I can't even tell you how it is. And because I came up in a home just like that. That's why I took my kids myself. I took my daughter to get her ear pierced. My dad would have never thought about doing anything like that. You know, and that goes back to my man's point, Tyrone. My dad was of the wallet era. Okay. I'm of the, and I'll be 65 next month, so I'm not young. I'm of the involvement era because I see the damage that what happens when we're not involved. Then our kids get grown and we don't know them. The mom knows them, but they really don't know their dads. You know why? Because a lot of dads don't know how to be dads. We think they do. They know how to be fathers. But in order to be a dad, there has to be an implementation within yourself of vulnerability and intimacy. When I was with my grandbaby, when I held her and birthed her, that was a great feeling, man. My dad, he would act like he gonna drop the baby. You know what I'm saying to you? And when I come in the room, her head turned. And when I say, hey, Nene, come here, and she crawls over to, I mean, this is a beautiful thing. And a lot of men don't know what they're missing out on. So you can help them. You can open a world of involvement that they don't know about. You can show videos in these conferences. You can have somebody like me come and speak to them. They got this passion and drive. Listen, man, you don't want to miss out on this. You can't undo. When I walked my daughter down the aisle in August, that was the best day of my life and the worst day, because I'm like, this is the little girl that my movement started off with. Now she's married, for God's sake. And you can't make up lost time. The other thing is, because you have an interest in it, sometimes you have to be the forerunner. And people, you know, that are forerunners, they tend to get hit the hardest, but nothing changes unless somebody brings about change. We're going to try something different. Let's try something different. Father's Day is coming. Start with Father's Day. We're going to call every father. Here you go. This is good. This is free. Call every father and say, hey, how you doing, Mr. Jackson? Happy Father's Day. We just want you to know here at Try Again Centers, we value you. This year, we're going to be looking more forward to getting you involved. So I'm giving you a heads up now. When I call you to ask you some questions, I'm going to give you a quiz, and then I'm going to call you back. So you have time to ask mother what these answers are. You can make fun of it and give prizes for whoever has, you know, men like, make a competition. I talked to John's dad. John found out that his kids, you know, so-and-so, they got a deficit over here. Here's another thing. Kids that have mental health, fathers sometimes feel responsible and guilty, and they don't want to say it. Like my kids struggle with depression like I have. My daughter really struggles with it. But I'm also on the other side of it. So the problem I had now could be her solution.
This is, I mean, these are such great examples, and your stories are so helpful, amazing. I think we have time for one more question from Karen, but I'm just going to say that just so that we could hear from Karen and George for another minute, we're going to send out an email after the session with whatever's coming up next and the survey, just because we only had this little bit of time with folks today. So go ahead, Karen, please ask your question.
Good afternoon. I'm actually driving, but I'm hands-free. I took myself off mute to actually respond to the young lady's question in reference to contacting the fathers. What she may want to also attempt to do is to secure either an email or an actual cell number from them and begin to utilize the Class Dojo system to interact with her fathers, because that way she can send, much like the presenter was saying, she can do an all call and give them information. She can do an all call and send out information, but more importantly, she can send them resources that they can look at on their own so that they are more prepared to actually be able to do parent-teacher conferences, interact with the teacher, because sometimes the father may not know. And one of the other things that we developed to engage our fathers, because we actually do that in my programming, we host multiple events specifically for father engagement. And the very first one that we host is actually called Daddy Knows What. And what the young ladies do is they fill out questionnaires about themselves, and then the dads have to learn the information. And there are prizes that are involved in that. And we do that in September, and then we keep them involved throughout the rest of the school year.
Thank you so much, Karen. Those are really helpful. So, I mean, unfortunately, we're at time, and just another minute here. I just wanted to really thank George for bringing these excellent suggestions and rich experiences. I mean, we just really had this is just a slice of how valuable, George's experience is for all of our work. We were just chatting about this right before the session. I want George to come back and do a part 2 on kind of father's mental health, and really figuring out how frontline staff can be mindful of that and help connect to services and supports and help dads be able to address that, fathers and father figures. This was just a really amazing opportunity. We would love to hear from you. We have a couple more sessions coming up. Next week, we'll be hearing from Ricky Trainer, who has a lot of great experience engaging with fathers and father figures from special populations. And then for our last session in June, we'll be hearing from 2 folks from Rhode Island. So maybe some colleagues of folks who are on the line here. We'll talk about a peer support group that they've been administering in Rhode Island, and how they have leveraged their own lived experience to work with dads in this peer support group. You'll notice, if folks who were on last week, we did try to do breakout rooms in the short amount of time. This time we wanted to maximize the amount of time we had to talk with George. We would love some feedback about that, the length of the session, the format, and sort of anything else will be helpful. We'll follow up this session with some resources that George is suggesting, George's contact info, and then just a link to this. But let us know what would be helpful for kind of the rest of these sessions for moving your work forward in this area. And thanks so much to everyone for logging on today.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.
Tyrone, stay up, man.
Yep.